so that is why, you know, you need you can't have that in the same sentence. You need the singular subject to reflect the same thing, you know, you also need the pronoun, possessive pronoun in this case, to be singular. They have to match up. So you kind of have to explain that in the comment rather than just write, you know, subject, verb, agreement. Okay. So now we're going to skip to page 83. And this is sort of the guide for just making those marginal comments, and then you'll also have to make an end comment on the paper. So you need to make comments that are in conversation with the student and are going to help them, most importantly, to revise their upcoming papers. So I'll just sort of read some of this. We ask our students to imagine themselves in conversations with the authors of the essays they read. We ask our teachers to imagine their marginal comments as their own contribution to that conversation. Marginal comments should first and foremost engage with the student's ideas. Vague check marks or unexplained lines in the margins do not contribute to the conversation, but questions which force students to return to a given line of thinking and reconsider its direction push the conversation forward. So that's like one of the big kind of comments that you should make. Kind of asking questions in the margins when an idea could be kind of pushed out further. So an effective marginal comment would ask the student to consider some of the examples in whatever essay they're working on in order to question the author's conclusion. Or if a student is writing about happiness, why don't you ask them to define really what happiness means? Because that asks the students to consider and reconsider the ideas that they're talking about, the very words that they're talking about. So instead of writing, when you see you know, the quote choice in a student paper, don't just write something like, oh, good quote choice. If you're going to write good quote choice or bad quote choice, the bottom line is that you have to explain why you think it doesn't work. This is a fact quote instead of an idea quote, and here you really need an idea quote to help you make your point. This quote doesn't necessarily relate to the other quote in a way that is going to be fruitful in your analysis. So go back and make sure your quotes do that job. So that's the kind of comment that you would actually make. You don't want to be too negative or demeaning. If you say something like, I hardly see what you're getting at here, or WTF, or whatever, you know, students are probably just going to be offended and put down, and you kind of like have to really be therapeutic about the way that you write these comments. And then at the, you know, so those are your marginal comments. And like I said, you have one per page that are really well thought out and directive. And then you have end comments. So the end comment, if you turn to page 84, is when you can pose, you basically have to identify the promising moment or the one strength so the student doesn't go away feeling like, I can't do anything right. Then summarize the 2 or 3 most pressing points of concern in the paper. And they should be revision oriented. They should be like, if you're going to revise this paper, do this. And in general, when you're writing, you know, this is the kind of problem that you want to look out for. So don't just, you know, talk about mechanical errors. Really try to get the students to think about the complexity of the text, the connections between texts, to challenge their preconceived notions in your end comment, to develop their own ideas, even if it initially feels like that's going to make the paper chaotic and uncomfortable. So you guys don't have a next assignment in mind necessarily because you're interns, but just think about paper writing in general and what makes good paper writing happen. So to that end, everybody has the grading criteria. And I'd like you to look this over and read over Kathy's paper and just, you know, we'll take about 20 minutes or so, 15 minutes to try to see what kinds of comments you made on this paper and try to determine a final grade for it.
Do you want us to make marginal comments?
Yeah, you can write directly on the paper. But can I borrow some of this pen?